Jazakumullah khair, for granting us all of us this opportunity to discuss an issue that's on the minds of many of us with young kids, subhanallah. Especially for us, those who are living in a non-Muslim majority country, because we tend to struggle between, what does Islam say and what does the dominant culture say. So we as parents, as educators, we need to have a good understanding of what's going on in the majority culture so we can actually better be equipped to respond to our children, interact with them, and talk to them in a more effective way about these issues. When we are talking about the gender identity question, there are many terms that come up in the discussion. And so we're going to discuss the different layers of this topic and hopefully give you some idea about what does it mean in the US. When we're talking about gender identity, we're talking about sexual identity, and I'm going to explain all this in a little bit. But some of the questions that are coming up: am I a male? Am I a female? Am I attracted to same gender, other gender? We are hearing a lot nowadays about the word non-binary. We hear also heterosexual, homosexual. And I want to also draw your attention to like the adjectives we use in the English and in the Arabic. So we have the male versus female, and we have a man versus woman. And I'm hoping we're gonna allude to what are the differences between these. So the 5 layers we're gonna discuss today are the following: genetic makeup. And I'm sure under COVID, every one of us have heard about the genes because it had to do with the virus and it had to do with how the vaccine was actually created. There was a lot of work in the genetic sphere and the gene sphere that had to do with COVID. So we're going to talk about the genetic makeup. We're going to talk about morphology. And morphology, in simple words, it means, what does the eye see? What do I see on the outside? And gender, and I'll address that in a bit. And then sexual orientation and the romantic inclinations, which is another layer maybe we're not talking a lot about in it's not a major concern for many people, but I'm seeing it in my office, and we'll discuss this also again. So step by step, it all begins with the genes. So as I'm sure all of you know, every single cell in the human body has a nucleus, and in the nucleus there is the nuclear material, and that is basically broken down into small units, and every unit is called a gene. We have what is called 23 pairs of chromosomes in the human cell, and a chromosome is basically a collection of genes that come together, and they are together. When it comes to sex, there is a specific pair that actually determines whether someone is a man or a woman, a male or a female, and those are called the sex chromosomes. So on the right hand of your screen, you see like 2 X's, and this is what usually scientists say, that a female in her makeup, in her genetic makeup, she has 2 X chromosomes, like you see exactly on the screen right now. On the left hand side of the screen, you see another pair. One looks like an X and one looks like a Y, and that pair is the one that is in the makeup of men. Like the sex chromosomes of men have 1 X and 1 Y, and the sex chromosomes of a female has 2 X's. So far, so good. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is, in his creation, for those of us who study science, we're always in awe of the scientific, of how Allah allows the process of actually the creation of a fetus, or especially, you know, in the womb. So it's not only a matter of what are the sexual chromosomes of the fetus in the embryo. Between the 2nd month and the 4th month of gestation, subhanallah, there is a specific process that takes place, and it is as such. If there is 2 X's in the genes of the fetus, okay, then the fetus is going to develop as a female. And the development of a female in terms of organs, whether internal or external, is actually the default of the human development, of the human embryonic development. If there is a Y chromosome in the fetus, then testosterone is going to be produced in the fetus between the 2nd month and the 4th month. And that the testosterone is what actually is going to initiate the development of the male sexual organs, whether internal or external. And that's how the fetus becomes a male later on. So now that's the genetic makeup, and that is how it's connected to the morphology, like what we see on the outside. What we see on the outside is we see external features of the male and external features of the female. And those are directly related and connected to the genetic makeup of the fetus or the child. These are the 5 layers of sexuality as we are hearing about it in the US. So beginning with the right column here, this is the column that explains the genes, the one I just explained to you right now. So female has two X chromosomes. A male has an X and Y sex chromosome. Very rare situations, very rare, okay, that a fetus will have a different combination than what I have already listed to you, and what is normal and what is in most of the human population. Very rare situations where we might have a different combination of the X and Y in terms of like the numbers. So we will have more than 2 sex chromosomes. And I'm not going to go into these details, but those specific, they happen. It's not like they don't happen, they happen. And the ramifications of that, they cause certain problems that we're not going to go into. My main focus, though, is that this is actually very, very rare. Because sometimes when you hear about this gender identity talk, they talk about it and say that, oh, it's very normal, there is a biological component to it. And I want to emphasize that if they are talking about genetic makeup and that it explains this gender confusion, that's a very, very, very minor percentage of the human population. So this is the genetic makeup. Morphology is whether the person is exhibiting the female external organs or the male external organs. So it's either male or female, you know. Next to that, we come now to the big topic nowadays, which is the gender identity, which subhanAllah, like almost like when we wrote the book, Munira and I, and we finished writing the book in 2016, at that time, the gender identity piece was not like dominant. There wasn't really a lot of talk about it like it is nowadays. The issue at that time was the sexual orientation issue. So I'm just, I just want to emphasize that there will always be something we have to struggle with. There will always be something we need to understand. And so we need to do our work. We need to do our research. We need to understand it and then know how to handle it with our children. So now we come to the gender identity. Again, we're reading it vertically. So what are the types of gender identities, if you will? So we have what is called cisgender. And what does cisgender mean? It means that the genetic makeup, sorry, I didn't explain to you what gender means. Nowadays, in the talk that is happening in our narrative in the US, gender refers to how me as a person, how do I identify myself? Do I identify myself as a female or a male or a non-binary? Non-binary meaning I'm not a male, I'm not a female. I'm something neutral. I'm basically saying I'm rejecting being identified as one or the other. And I want you to identify me as a non-binary. And so the pronoun that you need to use with me is going to be they. I don't want you to tell me she if I'm as a female, and I don't want you to tell me he as a male. I am a they. That's what non-binary means. So gender nowadays in the US is relating to what is the individual definition of me as a person. How do I define myself in terms of a woman or a man? And how do I want you to address me? So now we have cisgender, and cisgender means that my gender aligns with my morphology, with how you see me, and it aligns with my genetic makeup. That's the cisgender. They align. They're the same. There's no conflict there. No problem. Transgender, on the other hand, is I am the opposite of what you see me, what you see, and I'm also the opposite of my genetic makeup. So that's the transgender. And the non-binary, I explained to you already. Now we're coming to the yellow column, which relates to the orientation. Orientation here, sexual orientation, talks about how me as a person, I'm attracted, who am I attracted to, and who do I have fantasies about in my sexual dreams. Heterosexual people are people who are attracted and have fantasies about the other gender. So if I'm a female, I am attracted and have fantasies about males. If I'm a male, I'm gonna have fantasies and I'm attracted to females. That's heterosexuals. Homosexuals, on the other hand, are the group who are attracted to same gender. So if I'm a male, I'm attracted and I have fantasies about males. If I'm a female, I'm attracted and I have fantasies about other females. And in our culture nowadays in the US, typically they used to say use the word gay for homosexual men, and use the word lesbian for homosexual females. Nowadays, sometimes they use gay to mean both. It doesn't mean that we're talking about specifically homosexual males. It could also mean that we're talking about homosexual females. There are so many definitions in this area, and every now and then people come up with different definitions. So it's just a matter of like keeping track and being up to date with what is changing. So if we go back to the term that Huwaida had in the flyer, she had LGBTQ. So L will be lesbian, G would be gay, T transgender, Q would be queer, which could mean anything. That's why you need to check with that particular person what do they mean? How do they define themselves? The bisexual is a group of people who are attracted and they have fantasies about both genders, same gender and other gender. And this column about sexual orientation is related to the actual sexual act, the actual sexual activity. And this is important, especially when we come to the last column, which is called romantic, which is also a new thing that came up in the last few years. And I'm beginning to see it in my office, which is basically people talking about just having romantic feelings toward someone else and not necessarily associated with sexual feelings. So I could be romantically, have a romantic feelings towards someone, but no sexual feelings attached to it. So again, same thing. It could be that I have some romantic feelings toward the other gender, or it could be someone from the same gender, or it could be biromantic, where I will have romantic feelings towards people who are same gender like me, or people who are from the opposite gender from me. And again, this one does not mean that this is associated with sexual feelings. It could just be that I'm just having romantic feelings towards this person. I'm so attached, or I'm so obsessed with this person. I love them so much. Any questions about these 5 layers of the sexual identity in the US? I'm not sure I understand.
There is actually, there is one question. Go ahead, sister.
But I don't know what is different. What's the different exactly? Can you explain to us, Shaima? What do you mean different?
Shaima, can you talk, my dear?
Yes, I'm talking about what is the difference between orientation and romantic. Is romantic, it's like a normal life, like when we have a romantic relationship with my peer at school, or
so part of it is that exactly what you're saying, which like for many people, like they will call it crushes, like you're having a crush on someone. And so I think we understood the idea of crush and having romantic feelings towards someone else when it came to the other gender. But what was different for me, for example, as a therapist, when I started seeing young people in my office who are talking to me about having romantic feelings towards same gender, that was something new for me. And also when they started telling me that they are biromantic, really, honestly, I learned about this from my clients. I had no idea. Okay, I mean, I had my client explain to me what she's a female in high school. So I had her explain to me, what do you mean by you are biromantic? Because I've never heard that term before. And then I went and I did, some research, and it's basically just having this overwhelming feelings of love and adoration towards someone else. So again, just like we are doing in the sexual orientation and the gender, it could be towards same gender, or it could be towards other gender. Now, as you can see, the issue of sexuality is very nuanced and very complicated also.
There is other questions,
okay, shukran. Could some gender romantic be confused with friendship? I personally think so. But when you have someone who's telling you, no, it's so different than a friendship, you need to take their word for it, and that this is what they believe. Okay, when I was growing up, and this was in the 70s, early 70s, yeah. And I grew up in Saudi Arabia. So I know, like, some of my colleagues at school, they had really very strong relationships with some of their colleagues. So my guess, and this is my guess, because again, we're talking about a new phenomena, and we're not talking about something that science have studied, if you will. We're talking about a phenomena, a social phenomena that people are sharing with us, and we are trying to explain. So if we go back to the 70s, I had colleagues who had very, very strong and intense attachment to same gender colleagues at school. And my guess is that particular kind of, like, if you will, friendship or relationship is what people nowadays, in terms of same gender, are calling romantic. But that's only my guess, okay? Because again, it's not something as science we have studied. We're just taking the words of people, what they're telling us, and we're trying to make sense of it. So before I move on to the next slide, I want to present to you and posit to you the idea that the gender identity here, the one in this column, the one about am I a woman, am I a man, it's more of a social construct than a biological construct. It's about how me as a person, how do I think about myself, and how do I want to be perceived and treated by other people. Of course, there will be some people who would say, no, no, it's not merely a social construct. It's not merely a perception. There is definitely some biological component to it. But we as science, if we look at the science, we really don't have very clear-cut evidence to say that there is something very clearly in the biology, in the genes, that defines that someone can say, even though their gene is like 2 X's and they're female, that then they can say that they are a male. We don't have yet clear-cut studies about this issue. So me, Noha, personally, my take and the take of other also psychologists and therapists is the gender piece is more of a social construct piece. It's more about the interrelationships between me as a person and other people in the society. So here I wanted to share with you, there is a famous psychologist, his name is Erik Erikson, and he divided the lifespan into what we call the psychosocial stages. And for every stage, he said that the child or the young adult or the older adult, every person is struggling with a specific question, if you will, during every stage. So I wanted to highlight to you that the issue of gender, meaning, am I a boy or am I a girl? This question begins to be asked and formulated in the toddler years and the early school years. So these 2 stages are very important for the formation of, am I a girl or am I a boy? And this is where we need to be intentional about actually making it certain for the child that he's a boy or he's a girl. Middle school is when you begin to see, or when I started seeing this topic about the romantic inclinations, the ones I told you about. I see it in this stage. And then the sexual orientation stage, and also again the gender identity comes up again back in the early adolescence, later adolescence, and then the early adulthood years.